Hi Power BI superheroes. Welcome to the Power BI YouTube channel and our new series called DAX for Dorks. We look forward to giving you a new superpower by adding DAX to your superhero toolkit.
Welcome back to the second part of our series, DAX for Dorks. Today we're going to have a look at the SUM and the SUMX functions, but we're also going to take a closer look at the relationships in our model, calculated columns, and measures. Once we've opened up our Power BI report and we have imported all the data that we require, we'll see how we've got a calendar, we've got categories, customers, locations, products, and our sales. If we go and look at our model, we'll see that all this data has been imported and that we've created relationships between our model. Here you can see relationships on the order date, between the birth dates, between product IDs, and so forth. So it really is necessary in order to create solid measures that your relationships have been created correctly. Once we go back to our report, we will now have a look at how we can create a calculated column. Calculated columns can be created in the data tables of Power BI and work in a similar fashion to Excel. In our sales table, we have all the sales data and a retail price, a cost price, quantity, and total sales and total cost. In order to create a calculated column, we're going to show you how one can create this formula. So we add a new column, and once we've created a new column, we need to give it a new name, which we'll call total sales 2, as we already have a total sales column. And from there, we are going to create the formula to take the retail price and times that by the quantity, which will then give you the same output as your total sales there. So if we just format that to 2 decimals, you will actually see that the output is exactly the same as we have in the total sales. So that's exactly how you create a calculated column, and it is very basic. The downside of calculated columns is that you're actually adding so much additional data to your report. So that's why we try and not use calculated columns, but rather use DAX measures. And we're going to be showing you how to use DAX measures next. Going back into the report section of our Power BI report, we are now going to look at two functions, namely SUM and the SUMX function. As explained in a previous video, the SUM function is an aggregator, which means that it actually calculates the column, and the SUMX function is an iterator, which means it does a calculation in the row context. So our pro tip is only use the SUMX function when you need to do row by row calculations. For our first measure, we'll be looking at the SUM function, which will be calculating the total sales column. When we go through to our test page, we can create a new measure. And from there, the new measure, we need to give it a new name, which we will call SUM new. And that will be total sales 2020, which will be equal to our SUM function. And we are looking for the total sales column. So we go through to our sales report, and here you will see total sales. We close the bracket and we press enter. So here we'll see that the new measure we created using the SUM function is exactly the same as the previous SUM measure. And now we can actually add this data to our table, and we will see here that it's actually calculating the sales in this table. And that's how we use the SUM function. The next function we'll take a look at is the SUMX function, and we're going to create it from scratch again. We're going to click on new measure, and we will go SUMX new total sales 2020. And what we need to remember with the SUMX function, that it is an iterating function. So it's going to go and have a look for a table. So we're going to go and look for a table first. And this actually takes 2 steps. You have to go and look for the table, and you have to then follow with the expression. So at the top here, you can actually see the SUMX asks you to go and search for which table the data is in, and then from there you're going to add your expression. So we want sales and we want the total sales, and we can close our brackets and press enter. So once we've done that, we click on our table and we click on SUMX new, which you can then see gives you exactly the same output as what you have in your sum function. Exactly the same outputs. So the one is just iterating over the rows, and the other one is calculating the column. In our second example of the SUMX function, we will take a look at the 2 parameters, namely the table and the expression, and how we can input that to create the table. So we go to new measure and we type in SUMX2 new, and that will be total sales is equal to SUMX. And now we need our table, which is the sales table. And we're going to have a look at the expression as well. And now we can actually do a calculation within this measure, whereby we look at the quantity of the sales multiplied by the retail price, which is then going to give you an output. Once we've created that measure, you can see there SUMX new, which is exactly the same as that measure. And let us put it into our table, and we'll see once again we've got exactly the same output here of the 14 million. So that is how we actually create the SUMX with the expression inside the function. So you will notice with the second example of the SUMX function that this calculation is exactly the same as the one that we created in the calculated column. So our calculated column over there also has the US dollar retail price times the sales in order to get the total sales. So as we said as well, calculated columns take up space. So what we're going to be doing there is we're actually just going to be deleting this, as we no longer need a calculated column because we've now created a measure that does exactly the same as what we've created in the calculated column. So that wraps up the sum and SUMX functions. But just to reiterate, there are 2 types of calculation engines within DAX. These are the aggregators and the iterators. Aggregating functions calculate columns, and iterating functions calculate rows. Of our aggregating functions are sum, average, min, max, and count, and iterating functions are functions that have an x at the end. So they are the sum x, average x, min x, max x, and count x. When reading Power BI documentation, the function documentation always refers to syntax and parameters. And in order for us to understand syntax and parameters, we can take a closer look at them. Syntax refers to the rules that define the structure of a language. Syntax in computer programming means the rules that control the structure of the symbols, punctuations, and words of the programming language. Whereas a parameter is a special kind of variable used in a function to refer to one of the pieces of data provided as input to the function. When looking at the sum function documentation, the syntax refers to the sum of the column, and the parameter's definition is the column that contains the numbers to sum. So the sum example here, you look at the sum of the sales order table, and the column that we are summing is the order quantity. In the SUMX function, the syntax looks at the SUMX of the table and then the expression. So the parameters, once again, is the table containing the rows for which the expression will be evaluated, and the expression itself is the expression to be evaluated for each row of the table. So in our example, we'll see SUMX of the sales order table, and in the column we are looking at is the order quantity.
To make sure you haven't missed anything, we have included additional links in the YouTube video description below. Go and have a look to ensure you maximize on all the free resources. Thank you for watching our video. If you've enjoyed the content, please like our video and leave us a comment below. To ensure you don't miss out on more free tutorials, please hit the subscribe button below. We look forward to seeing you next week, Power BI Superheroes.